Welcome, everyone. I want you to, uh, I want you to imagine something for me. Put yourself in this exact desperate scenario.
Mm-hmm.
You are fighting for your very survival in a dimly lit, blood-soaked underground pit.
Just a terrible place to be.
Absolutely horrific.
Right.
The air around you is thick. It's reeking of rotting fruit, stale sweat, and cheap ember wine.
Right.
You are intentionally taking brutal concussive hits to the face. You're deliberately letting blood drip from a gash on your forehead directly into your own eye.
Which is just wild to think about.
Right. Temporarily blinding yourself just to scrounge together enough copper and silver to afford life-saving medicine for your family.
Yeah.
You think you understand the rules of this game. You think you know exactly how cruel, how unforgiving, and structurally rigged your world is.
But then you pull a thread.
Exactly. You pull a thread, and you discover that your entire life, the very foundation of your society, and the 500-year history of your kingdom is an intricate, magical lie.
A lie designed specifically to keep you subjugated.
Yes. And that is the harrowing, brilliantly constructed journey we are embarking on today. We are doing a deep dive into the powerhouse novel that is Direbound by Sable Sorensen.
I am so excited for this one.
Me too. We're tearing into this book's intricate plot, dissecting its intense, deeply toxic character dynamics, and exploring a world-building system that is as dark as it is fascinating.
It really is a remarkable piece of fiction. And to fully grasp the stakes of that opening scenario you just painted, we really have to start by zooming out.
Right, look at the big picture.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We need to examine the high-level map of the world Sable Sorensen has constructed. So, Direbound by Sable Sorensen is an epic fantasy set in the kingdom of Nocturna.
Nocturna.
Right. Now, Nocturna is a nation defined entirely by conflict. For 5 solid centuries, this kingdom has been locked in a seemingly endless, grueling war against a neighboring land called Astriona.
And Astriona isn't just like a rival political state.
No, not at all. It is a land ruled by terrifying, immortal, vampire-like beings known as siphons.
And we should clarify, these aren't your typical romanticized vampires either.
Oh, far from it. They are parasitic entities. They feed directly on human life force to sustain their power and their immortality.
It's terrifying.
It really is. And to combat this existential threat, Nocturna has developed a primary line of defense. It's a highly specialized elite military echelon known as the Bonded.
The Bonded. And these guys don't just ride horses.
No, they ride massive, sentient direwolves.
Which is so cool.
It is. And they share this profound, magical, and telepathic connection with these beasts. And right at the absolute center of this sweeping geopolitical conflict is our protagonist, Meryn Cooper.
Meryn. I just love her character so much.
She's incredible. She begins the story as a gritty, hardened street fighter from the worst slums of the capital city.
And through a series of devastating events, she gets violently swept out of her poverty and thrust right into the elite, magical, and highly treacherous ranks of these bonded warriors.
Oh, I was deeply struck by those opening chapters, honestly.
Oh, they hit hard. They really do. The author paints such an unflinchingly bleak picture of poverty and desperation right out of the gate.
Yeah, it's brutal.
How does a story balance that heavy, grimdark tone with the more traditional magical fantasy elements we see later on? It kind of feels like the book is daring you to look away from the suffering before it introduces any of the magic.
Well, that is the crucial tension of the entire novel. The magical beasts and the epic battles are thrilling, yes, but what truly grounds Direbound by Sable Sorensen is its relentless examination of broader, very grounded sociological themes.
Right.
The story operates as a profound exploration of systemic class disparity. It delves into the psychological toll of institutional gaslighting on a massive scale.
Which we see so much of later on.
Exactly, and it ruthlessly interrogates the devastating true cost of holding and maintaining power. The narrative forces us as readers to ask difficult questions about what a society is willing to sacrifice.
Or rather, who a society is willing to sacrifice.
Precisely, who they are willing to sacrifice in the name of national security.
Let's start right there in the dirt. In the grit of the eastern quarter of the capital city, Sturmfrost.
Sturmfrost, yeah.
This is where we are introduced to Meryn Cooper. She's 23 years old, and she's the sole provider for her heavily burdened family.
It's a lot of weight on her shoulders.
A massive amount. She makes her living as a pit fighter in these illegal underground fighting rings. And her strategy in that ring tells you everything you could ever need to know about her psychology.
She views the world around her, yeah.
Exactly. There is this incredibly vivid scene early in the book. She's in the ring with a man who has a good 6 inches of height, and a significant amount of weight on her.
A total mismatch physically.
Totally. And he lands a solid hit, opening a cut on her forehead. But instead of wiping it away, Meryn intentionally lets the blood drip directly into her eye.
She feigns a whimper of pain, right?
Right. She actively, deliberately plays the role of the weak, injured, helpless woman. Why? Because she knows, on a fundamental level, that women in pain give men confidence in this society.
Yes, and consider the underlying mechanics of that tactic. We're looking at the concept of weaponized vulnerability.
Weaponized vulnerability. I love that term for this.
It fits perfectly. Meryn isn't fighting for glory, and she certainly isn't fighting fair. She relies entirely on the arrogance and the deeply ingrained biases of her male opponents to win.
Yeah, she lets them think they've got the upper hand.
She allows them to become overconfident. She allows them to get sloppy because they assume they have already won against a weaker opponent, and the moment they drop their guard, she strikes.
Driving a heel into a knee, a kick to the nose.
A forearm against the windpipe until they yield. It is a brilliant tactical maneuver, but it speaks volumes about the societal structure. Marginalized classes often have to use the biases of those in power as their only available survival tool.
That's a fascinating way to frame it. The tragedy is that she has to mutilate herself, essentially, to survive.
Yeah.
Her motivations are so deeply rooted in family duty. The cold, hard silver she wins isn't for a better life.
No, it's just to maintain a baseline of survival.
Exactly. She is fighting to buy expensive medicine from a local apothecary for her mother. And her mother's situation is just heartbreaking.
It really is.
She suffers from these violent, tragic, delusional episodes where she completely loses touch with reality. Sometimes she doesn't even recognize Meryn.
Which has to be so painful for Meryn.
So painful. And beyond her mother, Meryn fights to protect her 10-year-old sister, Sela.
Sela is the innocent heart of Meryn's world.
She is. She's the one bright spot Meryn is desperately trying to shield from the grime of the Eastern Quarter.
To fully grasp Meryn's desperation, we really have to look closely at the staggering social divide within the Kingdom of Nocturna.
Let's get into that, because it's intense.
The contrast within the capital city of Sturmfrost is not just stark. It is intentionally, structurally cruel.
Yeah.
On one hand, you have the commoner quarters, the Eastern Quarter, the Southern Quarter, where Meryn and her family live. The author heavily details the sensory experience of this poverty.
The buildings are permanently soot-stained.
Yes, from the industrial laundries where the commoners work themselves to the bone, the roofs are perpetually leaking. The air smells of unwashed bodies, raw sewage, and burning coal.
People are literally starving in the streets.
And then situated right within the massive protective walls of King Cyril's castle, you have the bonded city.
The juxtaposition is just jarring.
It's meant to be. The bonded city is an exclusive enclave for the elite warriors and their families. It is pristine.
The streets are literally heated from below by magical conduits.
Right, so that the winter snow never even has the chance to turn into sludge. The buildings are constructed of gleaming glass and white marble.
The residents walk around in plush, brightly dyed furs.
Completely insulated from the freezing squalor just outside their walls. It is a society fundamentally broken by war, where the military elite live in unimaginable hoarding luxury, while the commoners whose labor supports them are left to rot in the slums.
And that structural inequality breeds a very specific kind of environment.
It gets significantly worse than just economic poverty, too.
Right, because the commoners are living in a state of constant pervasive terror.
The nabbers.
Yes, the nabbers. There is a local lore in the Eastern Quarter, treated almost like a boogeyman story by some of the more skeptical residents, but it is horrifically real.
Children in the commoner quarters are simply vanishing in the dead of night.
They are snatched from their beds through locked windows and bolted doors, and they are never seen again.
The truly chilling part is that the commoners know exactly what is happening. They aren't confused.
No, they know that the siphons, the enemy forces from Astriona, are somehow crossing the heavily fortified borders, sneaking into the capital city and stealing their children.
And the siphons are doing this to use the children as living blood bags, draining their potent, youthful life force to fuel their immortality.
But what drives Meryn absolutely insane is the apathy of the ruling class.
The king, King Cyril, and his elite bonded warriors do absolutely nothing to stop these abductions.
Nothing at all.
This is where the world building shifts from dark fantasy into psychological horror. I want you, the listener, to genuinely consider what it does to the human psyche to live in a society structured like that.
It would break you.
Imagine living in a neighborhood where the authorities, the very people who possess magical direwolves and weapons, the people sworn and equipped to protect the realm, completely ignore the systematic abduction and murder of your community's children.
They don't investigate. They don't increase patrols in the poor neighborhoods.
They simply let the attrition happen. They treat the loss of commoner children as an acceptable margin of error in their larger war. It breeds a feral, simmering rage.
And Meryn is the physical embodiment of that rage. She's the product of a society that has told her repeatedly and violently that she is entirely disposable.
And you can see how this trauma is generational.
Yes, we learn that Meryn's father died fighting on the front lines in this endless war. That loss was the catalyst that triggered her mother's descent into madness.
Because of that, Meryn was forced to drop out of school as a child and take over her mother's grueling, backbreaking job at the laundry just to keep a leaking roof over their heads.
But importantly, Sorensen doesn't leave Meryn entirely isolated in this darkness. The book highlights two critical relationships early on that keep Meryn tethered to her humanity.
First, there's Igor.
Right, Igor. He is an older, gruff neighbor and the man who runs the pit training. He functions as the closest thing Meryn has to a father figure.
The narrative reveals that when Meryn was a grieving, intensely angry 12-year-old, she was picking fights in the alleyways just to feel something physical rather than the emotional pain of losing her father.
It was Igor who dragged her off the streets.
He brought her into his yard and taught her how to fight with discipline. He essentially taught her how to weaponize her grief, transforming her feral, self-destructive anger into something polished, focused, and lethal.
That relationship with Igor is so crucial because it shows that survival in the slums requires community, even if it's a harsh, bloody kind of community. And then, contrasting Igor's grit, there is Lee. Lee is introduced as Meryn's lover. He's this remarkably handsome, broad-shouldered palace messenger who always smells faintly of clean pine soap.
A scent that completely contrasts with the grime and blood of her everyday life.
Exactly. He shows up at her underground fights, waits for her in the shadows, and afterward, he pulls her into his lap, painstakingly cleaning and bandaging her wounds.
The introduction of Lee serves a vital narrative purpose. He represents a rare, precious safe harbor for Meryn. He is someone who actively cares if she gets hurt, which is a profound novelty in her brutal existence.
Right.
He represents a sliver of hope, a connection to a world slightly above her own, yet he remains accessible to her because he presents himself as a mere messenger, a working-class servant of the palace. He is the calming force against the storm inside Meryn.
But of course, in a novel like Direbound by Sable Sorensen, any fragile stability a character builds is destined to be shattered.
And that shattering is the inciting incident of the entire narrative.
Despite all of Meryn's fierce protectiveness, despite her bleeding in the pits to afford locks for their doors, the nightmare breaches their home. Her 10-year-old sister, Sayla, is abducted from her bed in the middle of the night by the nabbers.
The fallout from that abduction is devastating. The author writes a heart-stopping sequence where Meryn searches the labyrinthine streets of the Eastern Quarter in the middle of a blinding blizzard,
Screaming her sister's name until her throat bleeds.
It is a moment of pure, unadulterated helplessness. And when the dawn breaks and Meryn realizes Sayla is truly gone, she is forced into a radical, unthinkable paradigm shift.
Right, because she realizes the bitter truth of her reality. The king isn't going to send a search party. The city guards are never going to knock on her door to help. The establishment considers Sayla a lost cause.
So Meryn takes matters into her own hands.
She deduces that the only way she has even a fractional chance of finding the siphons who took her sister is to get herself to the front lines of the war.
She needs access to the battlefield.
And the fastest, though most dangerous way to the front lines is to enlist in the military. Specifically, she decides to volunteer for the upcoming bonding trials, knowing full well it's likely a death sentence.
Okay, let's unpack this. That decision catapults us out of the slums and into the brutal mechanism of Nocturna's military complex. The transition into what is known as the Ascent is jarring.
The Ascent.
The Ascent is the highly deadly climb up Mount Wolfsbane, and it serves as the very first test in the bonding trials. Sable Sorensen strips away any romanticized notions of magical academies here.
This isn't a whimsical school where everyone is guaranteed a magical companion in a cozy dormitory.
Not at all. This trial is a slaughter. The recruits are tasked with climbing a freezing, treacherous, nearly vertical mountain face in a storm just to reach the plateau where the direwolves are waiting.
Let's talk about these direwolves because they are the cornerstone cornerstone of the world building, and they are terrifying.
In the lore of the book, they aren't just unusually large dogs or tamed beasts. They are massive, highly sentient magical entities.
We're talking about creatures whose shoulders stand taller than a full-grown human man. They have razor-sharp claws that can cleave through armor, and they possess their own innate forms of magic.
But the most crucial element of their lore is their agency. The humans do not pick the wolves. The wolves select their human riders based on a profound, soul-deep compatibility.
Exactly. It's a recognition of shared energy, spirit, and internal drive, which makes Meryn's situation on the mountain so compelling.
She is climbing this sheer cliff face, completely exhausted, her hands freezing, watching other desperate recruits literally slip and fall to their deaths around her.
And her only goal is to survive the climb so she can enlist as a regular, unbonded foot soldier.
Right. She actively, fiercely does not want to bond with a wolf.
She views the bonded as the elite oppressors, the very people who sat in their heated glass towers and ignored her sister's kidnapping.
It's the ultimate irony. She hates everything the wolves represent. But despite her active mental resistance, despite trying to shrink away from the beasts at the summit, she is chosen.
Out of the blinding snow steps in Assa.
Anassa
is a towering, terrifying, silver-white direwolf, an absolute apex predator. She bypasses the eager, well-trained recruits and claims the bleeding, freezing girl from the slums who wants nothing to do with her.
When that bond initiates, it introduces us to the physical mechanics of the magic system. When Meryn finally reluctantly touches Anassa's fur, there is an immediate, shocking physical toll.
The magic surges through her system.
And Meryn's dark hair instantly, painfully turns entirely silver white. The text establishes that this is an incredibly rare, almost mythical occurrence.
Normally, when a human bonds with a wolf, they might get a single streak of color in their hair that corresponds to their wolf's coat, denoting their pack affiliation.
But Meryn's complete hair color change instantly marks her as a massive anomaly. It visually alienates her from everyone else and immediately paints a target on her back.
She goes from being invisible in the slums to being the most hyper-visible person on the mountain. And before she can even process this massive biological change, the recruits are addressed by one of the lead instructors, Alpha Stark Therian.
Oh.
Stark is an imposing, deeply intimidating figure. He is a massive, hyper-competent warrior, his neck and hands covered in dark, jagged tattoos.
He rides a night-black direwolf named Kratos, and together they look like the embodiment of death.
Stark doesn't offer congratulations. He lays out the horrific rules of the trials.
Stark informs them that surviving the climb and being chosen by a wolf does not make them bonded. It simply makes them a raw bond, a trainee.
And their very first test begins immediately.
The human and their new wolf must make it back down the treacherous mountain and inside the safety of the castle walls before sundown.
If they fail, if the human is too slow, too injured, or simply too weak to keep up with the supernatural pace of the wolf, the nascent magical connection between them will violently sever.
And when a bond severs, the human dies instantly.
Stark delivers this news with a chilling level of casual cruelty. He looks down at the freezing, bleeding commoners like they're nothing more than disposable fodder. It's a stark reminder that this military machine doesn't value human life. It only values power.
That scene on the summit perfectly encapsulates the entrenched classism of Nocturna. You have this profound, disturbing visual contrast between Meryn and the other common-born recruits versus the legacy recruits.
The commoners are wearing threadbare coats, their boots are falling apart, and they're literally fighting off hypothermia.
Then you have the legacy recruits, the children of the existing bonded who were born and raised in the luxury of the bonded city.
They arrive at the mountain in warm, custom-made, magically insulated furs.
They have been well-fed and highly trained by private tutors since childhood. They treat this deadly trial not as a fight for survival, but as their glamorous, inevitable birthright.
The book notes that the legacy recruits literally race each other down the mountain for sport, treating it like a game, while Meryn is stumbling over rocks, trying not to let her heart stop from the magical strain.
And to make matters worse, Meryn's experience of the bond is uniquely isolating.
As she makes her way down, she overhears other recruits gasping in awe, experiencing this flowing, telepathic river of connection with their wolves.
They are communicating thoughts, feeling their wolf's instincts, and moving in tandem.
Meryn experiences the exact opposite.
When Meryn attempts to mentally reach out to Anassa, her mind slams into what she vividly describes as an impenetrable iron wall.
There is no telepathic river. There is no warmth.
Anassa is actively, stubbornly shutting her out of the bond. Meryn doesn't know how to communicate with the beast, she doesn't know how to ride her, and her wolf seems to actively despise her weakness.
Yet, Meryn is biologically bound to this creature for life. If she fails to figure it out, she dies, and her sister remains lost to the siphons.
She barely survives the descent, collapsing inside the gates just as the sun sets. And from there, she is thrust into the labyrinthine pack politics that define life within the castle walls.
The author builds a really complex military structure here. The Bonded aren't just one big army. They're divided into 4 distinct packs, each serving a highly specialized strategic role in the war effort.
Let's break down that lore because it dictates the social hierarchy of the entire academy. First, you have Demos. These are the vanguard warriors. They ride exclusively dark-coated wolves, they are known for their sheer brutality and overwhelming physical prowess on the battlefield, and they are led by the menacing alpha we met on the mountain, Stark Therian.
Right.
Then there is Strategos. This pack represents the tacticians, the generals, and the leaders. They ride silver or white wolves, and because Anassa is a silver-white wolf, this is the pack Meryn is involuntarily assigned to.
Right alongside the legacy recruits who despise her.
Precisely. The third pack is Cryptos. They ride wolves with mottled or gray coats, and they function as the spies and intelligence gatherers, specializing in stealth and reconnaissance.
And finally, there is Phylax.
The guardians and protectors who focus on base defense, logistics, and support. By placing Meryn and Strategos, the pack of leaders and tacticians, the narrative puts a street-brawling pit fighter into a room full of aristocratic legacy recruits who believe leadership is tied to bloodline and wealth.
The culture shock is immense. Meryn is struggling to survive the grueling physical training and the intense psychological bullying. She is exhausted, she is alienated from her wolf, and she is desperately missing her lover, Lee.
He is the only piece of her old life that offered comfort, but she hasn't seen him since she enlisted.
And here's where it gets really interesting. The author delivers the first massive twist of the book.
The revelation at the grand ball.
Yes. The Academy hosts a grand ball to formally present the surviving Rabons to the court. Meryn is forced to attend, dressed up in an emerald gown, feeling completely out of place among the nobility.
She looks up to the elevated dais where King Cyril is holding court.
And standing right beside the king, wearing the formal jeweled attire of royalty, is Lee. The lowly, pine-scented palace messenger who used to sit in the dirt of the slums and bandage her bloody knuckles is not a messenger at all.
He is Crown Prince Killian Valtaire.
By turning the familiar secret prince romantasy trope on its head, Sorensen creates a moment of profound psychological horror.
In many contemporary fantasy stories, the revelation that a protagonist's humble lover is actually royalty is treated as a delightful surprise, an instant upgrade in social standing, and a pathway to a fairy tale ending.
But here, the narrative takes a much darker, far more realistic approach to power dynamics.
We must closely analyze Meryn's internal reaction to Killian's true identity. She does not swoon, she doesn't feel lucky, she feels profoundly, intensely betrayed, and physically sickened.
Because the implications of his lie are staggering. He wasn't just hiding his wealth to be treated normally. Meryn connects the dots immediately.
As the Crown Prince, Killian knew everything.
He was actively, consistently spending time in the slums of the Eastern Quarter. He heard the stories. He knew firsthand that innocent children, like her sister Selah, were being abducted by siphons in the night.
And he did absolutely nothing to stop it.
He had the entire power of the Nocturnan throne, the military might of the Bonded, and massive resources behind him. And yet, he chose to play dress-up as a peasant, enjoying the grit of the slums as a tourist, instead of protecting the very people he is destined to rule.
And when Meryn finally confronts him, Killian's response is a masterclass in textbook systemic gaslighting.
It's infuriating to read.
He doesn't apologize for his inaction. He attempts to manipulate her grief and her affection. He looks her in the eye and tells her he kept the secret for her own good.
He claims he didn't want to add to her burdens when her sister was taken, framing his deception as an act of protective love.
He tells her that if she just gives him a chance, if she just trusts him, he will change the kingdom once he ascends to the throne.
It makes your skin crawl reading it. He is weaponizing his affection to maintain control over her narrative. He doesn't want an equal partner. He wants a pliant, grateful queen who will overlook his complicity.
He wants the street fighter's loyalty without having to actually fight for the streets.
It is a deeply toxic dynamic. And this betrayal isolates Meryn even further at a time when she is already drowning in the academy. She rejects Killian's advances, which only makes her situation more precarious.
Because now she isn't just a commoner. She is a commoner who has publicly spurned the crown prince.
The hostility she faces from her peers escalates from mean comments to active sabotage. The legacy raw bonds in her pack, particularly a cruel aristocratic woman named Periel and a massive, aggressive Deimos recruit named Jonah, view Meryn with absolute disgust.
They believe she is a filthy commoner, completely unworthy of Anassa's power, and they are intensely jealous of her unprecedented relationship with the prince. They use every opportunity to humiliate her.
The training sequences vividly illustrate her vulnerability in this hostile environment. Meryn is consistently failing her agility and combat drills because Anassa still flat-out refuses to cooperate with her.
While the legacy recruits are executing flawless, synchronized maneuvers with their wolves, Meryn is getting thrown in the dirt, making her look entirely incompetent in front of the instructors and her peers.
This culminates in a particularly terrifying training exercise. It's a massive, inter-pack combat drill held in the main arena. King Cyril himself is present to observe the raw bonds.
And the king wields a deeply unsettling magical artifact called the Direwolf blade.
It's a golden sword with a direwolf head pommel. According to the kingdom's history, this sword was gifted to King Cyril's ancestors by the faceless goddess herself, and it grants the reigning monarch the ultimate power to control, manipulate, or even sever all human bonds to the direwolves.
The king's use of the Direwolf blade in this scene is a raw, terrifying display of authoritarian control. To test the raw bonds, King Cyril draws the sword and uses its magic to force the direwolves in the arena into a literal blood frenzy.
The wolves lose their minds. They stop listening to their riders and start attacking everything in sight.
It causes absolute bloody chaos in the sand. It is a stark reminder to everyone present that the king holds ultimate authority over both the beasts and the bonded warriors. Their power is only lent to them by his grace.
In the midst of this terrifying dust-choked frenzy, the Deimos bully, Jonah, sees an opportunity. He uses his magic to launch a lethal attack directly at Meryn while she is disoriented and separated from Anassa.
It's a kill shot disguised as an accident in the chaos.
But before the magic can strike her, someone intercepts it. And shockingly, it isn't Killian.
It is Stark Therian.
I remember reading that and having to stop and reread the page. Why would the man who seems to embody the elite, classist military structure risk his life for the commoner he's been degrading?
It's the first major crack in his imposing facade.
It hints that Stark's underlying motives are incredibly complex, and that his outward hostility toward Meryn might be a carefully constructed cover for something much deeper and more dangerous.
This incident subtly but firmly pivots the narrative trajectory. We move from a straightforward, gritty survival story into the realm of a deep, high-stakes political mystery.
The world around Meryn begins to shift rapidly. Shortly after the arena incident, the existing alpha of the Strategos pack, an older legacy warrior, tragically dies during a skirmish on the borders.
To the absolute shock of the entire academy, and especially to Meryn herself, the Sovereign Alpha, the supreme military leader of all the bonded forces, steps in and officially promotes Meryn to the rank of Alpha of Strategos.
Which makes no sense to the legacy recruits, considering she is failing her drills. But the Sovereign Alpha explains that rank isn't just about human skill, it's about the power of the wolf.
And Anassa has been recognized by the pack magic as a dominant alpha-tier direwolf. So ready or not, Meryn is given the title, the authority, and most importantly, the access that comes with being a pack leader.
That access is the key that unlocks the true history of Nocturna. As an alpha, Meryn is granted entry into the restricted archives deep beneath the castle.
And it is there, hidden behind a false wall in a forgotten, dusty alcove, that Meryn discovers a fragile, handwritten, leather-bound book.
This book contains a history that contradicts everything she has ever been taught. It details the reign of the Sternfrost Queens.
The lore drop here is staggering. The book describes a matrilineal line of bonded queens who were the original rightful rulers of Nocturna.
These queens didn't rule with an iron fist or a magical sword of subjugation. They ruled with fairness, wearing a crown of leaping wolves.
They were the ones who originally united the humans and the sentient direwolves in a true equal partnership, long before the current King Cyril's family, the Valtirs, ever took power.
When we connect this historical revelation to the broader narrative, the author executes a masterful reframing of Meryn's personal trauma.
We must analyze what this means for Meryn's mother.
For years, Meryn believed her mother's mind was simply broken by grief. Her mother would have these violent, screaming episodes, frantically rambling about someone named Lumina, shouting about a crown of leaping wolves, and crying out for the twins.
It gives me chills just thinking about it, because it wasn't madness.
The fragmented rants weren't delusions born of trauma. They were magically repressed memories and prophetic visions fighting their way to the surface. Meryn's mother was speaking the truth of their bloodline.
The book proves that Meryn's family line is the Sturmfrost line. They are the true royal family, forced into the squalor of the Eastern Quarter, their history violently erased from the kingdom's collective memory.
Imagine the psychological weight of that discovery. Believing your entire life that your mother was fundamentally broken, only to find out she was actually suffering under the immense, crushing weight of a forgotten, world-altering truth.
And the hidden book doesn't just reveal who the true queens were. It reveals how they were overthrown, which brings us to the true, horrifying nature of the siphon threat.
Right, because the siphons aren't just mindless vampires acting on instinct. They wield highly sophisticated, ancient blood magic.
The hidden text reveals that King Cyril's ancestor, the very first Valtyr king who supposedly united the lands and saved humanity, was not a human at all. He was a siphon in disguise.
He was a siphon who infiltrated the Nocturnan court and used a dark, incredibly complex form of transference magic to murder the reigning Sturmfrost queen and steal the throne.
He then used powerful, widespread blood magic, channeled through that very same golden sword, the Direwolves, to wipe the public's memory of the true Sturmfrost queens entirely.
He rewrote the history books, exiled the surviving heirs to the slums, and set up his parasitic lineage to rule over a subjugated human populace.
It completely flips the script of the war. The 500-year war against Astriona isn't about defending humanity.
It's a manufactured conflict designed to keep the populace terrified, dependent on the Valtyr crown, and distracted, while the Siphon Kings secretly harvest the children of the slums to maintain their own power.
This profound revelation forces an evolution in Meryn's character. As she uncovers this horrific systemic abuse, her own behavior begins to align more closely with the brutal reality of the world she inhabits.
She sheds the last remnants of her hesitation. There's a chilling, highly illustrative scene shortly after her discovery.
A nabber, a siphon operative caught trying to steal a child, is captured by the guards and brought down into the deepest, darkest castle dungeons for interrogation.
Meryn is absolutely desperate for any information about her abducted sister, Selah. She uses her new alpha authority to bypass the guards and enters the cell to interrogate the siphon herself.
And the siphon is arrogant. He looks at this silver-haired girl and taunts her, refusing to speak, assuming she won't cross the line into actual violence.
But he fundamentally misunderstands who he's dealing with. He sees a noble alpha. He doesn't see the pit fighter.
Meryn doesn't just question him. She relies on the brutal tactics she learned in the underground rings. She tortures him.
She uses her environment, her physical strength, and her overwhelming rage. And ultimately, when he refuses to yield the location of her sister, she executes him in the cell. It is a moment of pure, ruthless violence.
And what makes that scene so pivotal is Anas's reaction. Up until this point, the direwolf has blocked Meryn out, viewing her as weak.
But in the bloody aftermath of that cell, Meryn feels a shift in her mind. The iron wall drops. Through their newly opened mental bond, Meryn feels Anas's distinct, dark, predatory approval.
It is the moment they truly bond. Not through nobility, not through grace or righteous justice, but through shared, unadulterated savagery.
Meryn's brutal alley-cat instincts perfectly match the apex predator nature of the direwolf. They firmly cement their connection as an alpha pair by embracing the necessary violence of their reality.
That dark alignment perfectly sets the stage for the book's breathtaking climax, which takes place during an event known as the Purge.
The Purge is the final bonding trial ceremony, a massive formalized event held in the central enclosed arena.
The king, the entire nobility, and all the elite bonded packs are present. Meryn is required to walk up to the royal dais, kneel before King Cyril, and receive his formal blessing, cementing her place in his military.
But Meryn has accepted her true destiny. She knows the king is the source of the blood curse that erased her family's history. She knows his bloodline is responsible for the abduction of the children, potentially including her sister.
She steps into that arena not as a loyal soldier, but as an assassin.
So what does this all mean? The tension in this scene is suffocating. Meryn walks up the steps of the dais. She makes eye contact with Killian, who is standing beside the throne, believing that despite his lies, he truly wants a better kingdom and will support her if she removes the tyrant.
She uses her newly established telepathic bond to coordinate flawlessly with Anassa.
In a blur of motion, as the king raises the Direwolf blade to bless her, Meryn strikes.
She disarms the king, takes his own magical sword, and in front of the assembled nobility and the entire military might of Nocturna, she drives the golden blade straight through King Cyril's chest.
She executes the Siphon King on his own throne, believing that this single act of violence will break the blood curse and free the kingdom.
The sheer chaos that erupts in the arena is masterfully depicted. The Deimos warriors draw their weapons, the direwolves are howling, and Meryn turns to Killian, waiting for the crown prince to call off the guards, to declare the truth of his father's tyranny and to stand with her.
But he doesn't.
Killian's reaction is the ultimate act of political maneuvering and betrayal. Instead of supporting her, Killian's face twists into a mask of feigned absolute horror.
He points at Meryn and publicly, loudly accuses her of suffering from the very same violent madness that afflicted her mother.
He manipulates the narrative instantly, framing her not as a liberator, but as a deranged, treasonous commoner who just murdered their beloved sovereign.
He orders the royal guard to seize her, and she is dragged away and thrown into the deepest, lightless dungeon of the castle.
It is so incredibly frustrating and heartbreaking to read. She risked everything. She committed regicide based on a sliver of hope that the man she loved had some shred of honor, and he completely destroys her.
But the author isn't done twisting the knife. It gets so much darker.
Deep in the dungeon, stripped of her weapons and separated from Anassa, Meryn receives a visitor. Killian descends into the cell.
And it is here, in the dark, that he drops the final, devastating, world-shattering twist of the novel. He drops the facade of the morning sun and the reluctant prince.
Killian reveals that he isn't just a complicit prince who looked the other way. He is the vessel.
The vessel for Alistair. Killian explains the true horror of the Valtire royal line. They don't just inherit the throne, they inherit a soul.
The royal line uses that dark transference magic to pass the ancient, original siphon soul Alistair, the one who stole the throne centuries ago from father to son upon the moment of death.
The implications are horrifying. When Meryn drove the sword through King Cyril's chest, she didn't end the curse. She facilitated the transfer.
The moment the king's heart stopped, Alistair's soul moved directly into Killian's body. The man she loved, the man who held her in the slums and promised her the world, is literally the ancient monster who murdered her ancestors and stole her family's throne.
It completely reframes every single interaction they ever had. All those times he visited her in the Eastern Quarter, he wasn't slumming it for romance.
Killian's grooming of Meryn, his desperate desire to make her his queen, was a calculated centuries-long strategy. He recognized the Sturmfrost bloodline in her.
He wanted to bind the true heir to him in marriage, keeping the powerful magical bloodline subjugated and securely under his control, preventing any future uprisings.
But in the suffocating darkness of that revelation, Sorensen provides one final, crucial piece of the puzzle. After Killian leaves her to rot, another figure emerges from the shadows of the dungeon.
Stark Zarian.
Stark bypasses the guards, enters her cell, and finally explains his true allegiance.
And this is where the puzzle pieces of Stark's behavior finally snap together. He isn't the king's loyal lapdog. Stark reveals that his family, the Therians, have been part of a deep-cover generational resistance.
For centuries, they have secretly protected the fragmented Sturmfrost bloodline, keeping an eye on them in the slums, waiting for the magic to reawaken in a true queen.
Stark confesses the reality behind his actions at the Academy. His intense bullying, his apparent visceral hatred of Meryn throughout the trials was not rooted in classism.
He didn't hate her because she was a commoner. He was furious and absolutely terrified because the long-awaited true queen of Nocturna, the only hope his family had bled for over centuries, was unknowingly fraternizing with and falling in love with the very siphon usurper who stole her birthright.
His cruelty was a desperate, misguided attempt to push her away from Killian and force her to harden herself for the war she didn't know she was fighting.
He tells her it's time to run, time to gather the resistance. But Meryn refuses to leave the castle without Scylla.
Killian had previously claimed, as part of his manipulation, that he sent his elite guards to rescue Scylla from the Nabbers, promising Meryn that her little sister was safe within the castle walls.
Stark leads Meryn through a series of secret tunnels, navigating the bowels of the castle until they reach a hidden, heavily warded cell deep beneath Killian's own royal office.
The finale is absolutely unequivocally gut-wrenching. They break the wards and open the heavy iron door. And there, sitting in the corner of the stone cell, is 10-year-old Scylla.
But she isn't safe. The tragedy of this scene is suffocating. Meryn drops to her knees and reaches through the gloom to hold her sister, the girl she bled in the pits to protect.
And as she touches her, she realizes the horrifying truth of Killian's rescue.
Killian didn't save Sayla from the blood magic, he subjected her to it. As the innocent little girl turns to look at her older sister, the light catches her face.
Sayla's eyes are entirely black. She opens her mouth and she bears elongated predatory fangs.
Killian has used his ancient magic to corrupt the child, turning the innocent heart of Meryn's world into a bloodthirsty siphon.
It is the ultimate punishment for Meryn's rebellion and the ultimate leverage to try and force her compliance.
It is a tragic, horrifying conclusion that strips away the very last vestiges of Meryn's innocence and hope. But fundamentally, it is also the supreme catalyst for her ultimate transformation.
In those final moments, looking at the monstrous reality of what has been done to her sister and to her world, Meryn stops fighting her destiny. The pit fighter dies in that cell.
She stands up, and the narrative tone shifts from desperation to cold, absolute resolve. She fully accepts her title as Queen Meryn Sturmfrost.
She embraces the dark, violent magic surging in her own blood. She accepts her bond with the lethal Anassa, and she vows to tear down the entire kingdom to hunt Killian Valtyr to the ends of the earth.
It is an incredible, exhausting, and brilliant journey. We followed Meryn from the desperate, grimy pit fights of the Eastern Quarter all the way to a magical, blood-soaked throne room, and finally to the precipice of a true revolution. Direbound by Sable Sorensen is a masterclass in escalating stakes and compounding trauma.
It really is. It takes all the familiar fantasy elements and coats them in a layer of grime and political realism that is impossible to put down.
The story brilliantly weaves together the sheer bloody resilience required to survive systemic institutional oppression. It highlights the profound existential danger of allowing those in entrenched power to rewrite the history of the marginalized.
And it showcases the shocking, horrific lengths to which a parasitic ruling class will go to protect its stolen authority.
It leaves us to ponder a final, deeply provocative thought. If the history of your world and even the deepest, most personal memories of your own family were entirely rewritten by those in power, what small, undeniable instinct inside you would survive to guide you back to the truth?
Wow, that is a heavy, lingering question to end on. Thank you to everyone for joining us on this deep dive into the incredible dark world of Direbound by Sable Sorensen. Keep questioning the narratives around you, look closely at the structures of power in your own life, and always search for the hidden truths. We'll see you next time.